I think being curious is a really important piece of the puzzle. Being curious, working hard, working together. Collaboration's big. I tell people that, at least in my department, time management, teamwork, communication, those are the three kind of core tenets of how I want people to be. And then in regard to communication, inform, collaborate, decide.
Welcome to this week's As Unexpected podcast, when we talk to C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists about how they lead into the future when the future generally goes as unexpected. I'm Scott Marshall, your host, and my own professional experience has made me a believer that it's not how you show up when all goes as planned, but it is how you show up when things go as unplanned. Given all of their experiences, each of our guests has become very attuned to the fact that the future is not to be predicted. My hope is that this podcast can help all of you become better leaders by building the core leadership capabilities for leading in an uncertain world. My guest today on the As Unexpected podcast is Jason Moulton, and I'm so excited to have him. This individual has really excelled in the wine industry and has an amazing story to tell. Jason, thanks so much for joining the podcast today. If you don't mind, could you take a minute to introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Scott. Really a pleasure. So my name is Jason Moulton, as you know, and I'm the director of winemaking and viticulture for a winery here in Napa Valley. It's called Whitehall Lane Winery. It's in Rutherford, St. Helena area. And what more can I tell you there?
So what kind of led you on this journey up to this point? I mean, being the director of viticulture and winery, that's a substantial role. Clearly, you understand how to grow a grape and you understand how to make wine, which not everybody does.
Yeah, so a lot of education behind that, but a lot of real experience out in the field. No pun intended, out in the vineyards, and really from the ground up. You know, I started in the cellar for a number of years, working all over the world, actually, a number of different continents: South Africa, France, New Zealand. Went to Canada. And landed here in Napa Valley. But, you know, within that journey, there's a cellar experience and there's a vineyard experience. And so the two collide at some point, and, you know, that can, that collision of the two worlds meeting is kind of where I fall in between. And then obviously there's elements of business within that. And so I kind of intertwine between vineyard, winemaking, and lab and administrative, you know, managing people. It's a big part of my job. It's not just managing plants or fermentation. Humans, human resources are a big part of what we do, and they are guiding the wine more than anything.
I'm tempted to ask the question, but maybe we can address it later. What's more challenging, managing the humans or the grapes? But we can get to that. Probably both very rewarding.
Yeah, and it's very different. You know, taming the plants. You're at the whim of Mother Nature, and not everything's going to work out. And people all the same have different things going on with their lives in tandem with work lives, and so it's working with them and the job riggers, and it all happens. Make the magic happen.
Make the magic happen for the people and for the plants, right?
You got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jason, the name of this podcast, As Unexpected, I come to firmly believe that leadership is much more about how we show up when things go as unexpected rather than when they go as expected or planned. And life is really complex, and it seems more often than not things go as unexpected. So I'd love for you to share with our audience, if you would, some stories or a story about how you were presented with quite an unexpected external event or internal event, and how you showed up as a leader, how you worked with your team, and how you got through that period of time.
So I would definitely say winemaking has changed in the last 10 years with the amount of wildfires and just weather patterns changing that obviously make it harder for the grapes to do their job too. They are amongst us and kind of working with this climate thing that's going on. And so, I want to say the 2017 vintage for us was pretty impactful. And it was my second wildfire that I had been through. So I kind of, was able to manage a facility and a vineyard operation and the people that I had working around me. I'd done that in 2015 at another property. And so I'd been through that. So it wasn't my first rodeo, but the 2017 fires here within Napa Valley were quite significant in a different way. And this one actually displaced me from my home in the midst of, working a really intense vintage where everything was ready at the time this fire popped off. And so I'm sitting here trying to juggle work life, home life, and then I have to worry about other people's, lives as well, and make sure that our employees are okay, that they have a home to go to if they were displaced. And making wine in a challenging environment like that is definitely character building. And
it sounds like an understatement.
Yeah. And I had to change the way that I made decisions by looking at weather patterns and wind patterns and elevation of smoke in the air, and all of these things kind of combined. Then I also had to worry about workers picking grapes in smoke. And so you have to wait until the smoke is gone before they go. And this is kind of in the midst of what do people wear in the middle of a wildfire? And that's N95 masks, which now everybody knows about N95s with COVID. And so, that vintage was tricky in rallying the troops to stay the course in getting this job done, because this is an agricultural product. It is ready. It is perishable, but it's not, we're not trying to save the world by any means. So we're sitting here trying to make a world-class product, but being safe about it at the same time. And so, the balance of that, and then getting people excited to be there amongst this monster that's happening without panicking and then just running away from it all. That was the nature of that vintage, and that was extremely unexpected. And we had to pivot with the way that we made decisions, the way that we made the wine, cautiously, optimistically, conservatively, however you want to say it, to protect it, from smoke damage, as well as protect our people. So that was an incredibly challenging vintage. And I think one of the things that was kind of compelling for some of my employees that were with me was telling them, it's just like, hey, I don't have a home to go back to right now. I'm here steering this ship, and we mean business. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight, but I know that I'm going to get this job done here, and then I'll worry about that later. And that's, hopefully that was a motivator, for my employees.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program for college students and adults on career breaks, sabbaticals, or retired, interested in learning and exploring the world together. Learn more about the Lifelong Learner program at www.semesteratSea.org. Yeah, there's so much in that story. First of all, there's long-term trends that you're concerned about and trying to be thoughtful about in terms of climate change and the impact on their soil and your crop. But then there's the immediacy of an event that you said you'd been through, but this one sounds like it was much more dramatic in how you had to deal with it, the timing the safety concerns for both the people and the plants and the fruit. So what would you say when you got through that vintage and you had a minute to reflect? What were some of the things that came up for you in terms of these are the leadership traits I was attempting to exemplify, and how well did I do in that circumstance? What lessons did I learn? How am I a different leader after that?
Yeah, well, I guess one thing is it was not my first rodeo, but it was for a lot of the people around me. And being able to go through that experience, for me, the second time around was easier, but not for everyone around me. So I'm going through it, living in that world. But at the same time, what's new in this one is my family is separated from me. My home is, I can't go home. Town was evacuated for, I don't know, maybe 7 to 10 days or something. And how did I show up? Well, it's funny you say it. There was a fire in 2020. And so I did change the way that I managed things through that event based on how I acted in 2017. And that there were much more knowns rather than unknowns. And, there were so many unknowns in 2017, and there were very many knowns going into the 2020 event. And one of the things that I did change on top of, the way that I thought about it for everyone and our product was I had auto fermenters installed. So they didn't have to actually have people here doing pump overs and fermentation management, so that I could have machines doing it on automated on their own. And we actually had a generator, a portable generator, plugged in, hooked up. And so, there were the moments that were action, reaction. Okay, I need a generator to make sure there's power to everything and everything's operated. And then I have automation. So those are things I kind of responded to in a defensive, in a defensive way. So how do we protect our product, and how do we get all our people out? And basically in 2020, I could just evacuate everybody, and nobody had to be here for fermentation management, which made it much safer for our people and made it better for our fermentations.
So clearly you used all this experience to learn and adjust, innovate your processes. It also sounds to me, Jason, that you start from this place of authentic compassion around the people, which, in my experience, is not necessarily true of all people in leadership positions. And there's a business logic to it. Like you have to pick the grapes. You got the process to move forward. But it sounds to me like it's much deeper than that, because you are thinking about the whole person, the safety of their families. And if that's accurate, if that's fair to say, how have you seen that pay off in terms of retention, in terms of morale, the company culture?
So that's a great question. The wine industry is tricky nowadays with the labor pool, whether that's in the ag sector or in the, in wineries in general, in the administrative or seller function. So I think it's changed since COVID significantly. And so how would that have gone well then versus now? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's able to track. And there's so many people that are in the wine industry for different reasons. And in terms of retention, do they want to climb that ladder immediately? Do they want to stay in this industry, in this position, ad infinitum? There's different tiers of working in the cellar. Where are they now? What are they doing now? Actually, one of them is currently working with me right now, and she's my enologist. And so she went through that experience with us and had a great experience. And, I am a mentor to her. And she's retained for a long period of time and is with us for the long term. Yeah.
That's great. And, I've only spent a limited amount of time in a vineyard. So I'm going to offer a thought, but you will correct me where I go off. Even the handling of grapes, as I understand, has to be done with some training, some thought, that there's a lot of manual part of it, but it's still not someone you just hire anybody and they go pick a grape. You wouldn't want me going to pick your grapes. You want someone who understands the plant and the fruit. So if you could share with our audience more about the circumstances with your labor market and how you continue to approach that as, national policy, state policy, the flow of labor is available to you. What are the challenges you face and how do you address those?
Good, big question. And this is stuff I do talk about with a lot of people. Our vineyards are managed by what are called FLCs, farm labor contractors, or vineyard managers. And so they basically do the hiring and training, and we basically have a contractual relationship with that vineyard manager, third-party contractor, where they are responsible for labor laws, safety, training, everything with those employees. Now, how is it tricky nowadays? Recently, the agriculture work week was changed from a 60-hour ag work week to a 40-hour ag work week. That means that they are now agriculture workers are now getting overtime after 40 hours, whereas for years and years and years they had to work 60 hours. Once they get to that 61, they started getting agriculture or time and a half. And so with that, that changed in the last couple of years. Slowly, it went from 60 to 55, 50, 45, etc. Now it's down to 40. And the problem nowadays is their wages are increasing significantly. And they still want that overtime and are expecting that overtime. And not all companies can offer that overtime, or not all FLCs can offer that overtime, because now they've got a raise that's coming close to what they were doing before, but they're still saying, oh, geez, we used to work 60 hours. We used to work 65 hours. So I think it's complicated for a lot of the FLCs or people who have their own internal vineyard workers, ag workers out in the fields. So yeah, it's very, it's getting very expensive for people, and people are turning to automation as a result. And so there's a lot of new AI tractors. There are electric tractors. And so the industry is changing rapidly to reflect that. I mean, as is everything, whether it's AI or electric vehicle, now it's an electric tractor. And so, I'm imagining the movie Interstellar, if you're familiar, with those corn harvesting machines that Matthew McConaughey had to deal with, and I think that reality is coming closer and closer. And managing grapes can eventually get to that point. We're not there yet, but I can guarantee you this: there are multiple projects going on around the country that are involved with AI and moving forward the technology within the vineyards, because businesses see that is a sink, and the response is going to be swift in the next couple of years for making the bottom line better.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in what you shared. I'm 57 years old, Jason. AI is so hard for me to keep track of. I do spend my time reading, and I actually listen to podcasts about it. There's both the doomsdayers, but there's so much that I hear about the amazing benefits that AI can bring. And it's also, anytime there's a benefit, there's a cost. When labor prices are pressuring up, companies are going to find a way to make sure that they can survive, and they're going to find solutions like AI to help them do that. So that's fascinating. I've tried to stay up with all the evolution and actually revolution in AI, but I just never would have connected it to a vineyard. That's quite phenomenal. That's awesome. With that said, this is a great transition point because I'd love to bring in my two guests here, Kuki and Cam. They have a pretty provocative question in my mind around company culture. How do you lead, make sure new initiatives get put in place, and also maintain transparency, but also keep things fun. So let's listen to Cam and Kuki for a minute, and then I'd love to have you respond to their question.
Overall company culture is what really shapes the daily work environment. So I'm curious what initiatives leaders implement to kind of build a company culture that is both safe and transparent, but also fun and an enjoyable place to be. So Cam, what do you think about that?
I think especially in the context of more people being back in the office, more people spending physical time with their coworkers, I think this question becomes even more important because that experience at the workplace becomes an even bigger part of our lives. So excited to know when we pass it on what folks think about how we can make the workplace fun and meaningful while still, getting stuff done.
Okay, that's Kuki and Cam's question. What do you got, Jason?
So for company culture around here, I really like to maintain a positive atmosphere throughout. And if I can do that by, I basically bought my own barbecue. I brought it in here. So there's barbecuing. They can barbecue whenever they want. When we have time, we do wine tasting, blind tasting. I call it Thirsty Thursday. It's kind of like a Taco Tuesday, if you will. And it's basically supposed to get people thinking and open up about wine so that, we're all very sophisticated in how we talk about wine, but this is our moment to just talk about it and be open and have a safe space. Right.
Yeah.
And so we do that. And then, at Harvest, we have little competitions, tank dig outs. We've got time trials on who can dig out the fastest tank, and we all just give each other grief on that sort of thing.
What is a tank dig out? What is that?
Okay. So a tank dig out is after you drain a fermentation, you got the skins, the seeds, all still there, and a bit of the pulp maybe. But the juice is out, it's turned into wine, and you sent it to another tank. And so, you have to safely enter that tank with a CO2 oxygen monitor. And once it's clear, you get in that tank and you dig out. And we're talking shoveling, raking, and you're just throwing it out the bottom door of the tank. And it's like going to the gym times 10. And at the end of this process, you want to die, but you're just like, I did that. And you basically moved the equivalent of, I don't know, we have 10, 14 ton fermenters. And so, you have all those grapes left over, and we track each other and, tease each other. So, who can get the best time. And
what's the record time so far?
I'm not the best. We have it down to tons per minute. And I want to say that it's 1 minute and 18 seconds per ton. And I think that is the record. And so, it depends on the grape. If it's Merlot, that's tough because they're bigger berries. Malbec, really tough. You're gonna be pushing out a lot more weight. And Cabernet will break up. Pinot will break up really easy. That's easy. We'll give that to the interns because, we'll give them a break. Right. Okay. But I am by no means the winner. I have former employees who just kick my butt. So.
All right. Well, if I ever get down your way, I'm not sure if you should sign me up for that, but I'm pretty intrigued nonetheless.
I think you're in. If you're here at harvest time and there's a tank, I'll put your name on it.
All right. Well, let's give that some thought. I'm not sure if I'm the one to sign up, but I'm intrigued nonetheless. I'd love to witness it at the very least.
Yeah.
Hey,
okay.
Jason, this has been super helpful and really interesting. I'd love to finish up this podcast by just asking you, the the leader of today really is someone, I think, profoundly different than when I started my profession, how they show up for themselves and for their teams. If you could give one piece of advice to our listeners, whether they're Gen Z, Gen X, what would you say to them now about as they try to really live into their practice of leadership? What suggestions or counsel would you give?
So I think being curious is a really important piece of the puzzle. Being curious, working hard, working together, collaboration's big. I tell people that, at least in my department, time management, teamwork, communication. Those are the three kind of core tenets of how I want people to be. And then in regard to communication, inform, collaborate, decide. So, people have to be in the know. You have to see the process through. And, obviously what I do is, kind of precise in its own way. So we have to be very accurate in our procedures, by law and, our protocols to make a luxury product like wine. You kind of got to follow the rules and accept the way of wine.
There's a lot in there. I can't remember it all right off the top of my head, but there was so much in there with being, hard work, collaborating, communicating, managing your time. But what probably stuck with me most is you put a high regard to communication, that everybody's communicating. It sounds essential in your work to keep everything in process, keep the quality control in there, and make sure you come out with the most incredible wine possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's communication's key to everything.
Yeah. Hey, this has been awesome, Jason. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope to meet you in person and sip a glass of wine with you. I'm sure it's a beautiful location.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah. Look forward to seeing you one day.
All right. This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program where students visit 10 countries on 3 continents, all while taking 3 to 4 college classes through Colorado State University. See course offerings and upcoming voyage itineraries at www.semesteratsea.org. Thank you for joining this week's episode of the As Unexpected podcast. The viewpoints and opinions of featured guests do not necessarily represent those of the Institute for Shipboard Education or Semester at Sea. Hit the like button, share it with your colleagues, family, and friends, and remember, be curious, be compassionate, be courageous. That's what it takes to lead as unexpected.